Hello, my name is Patrick Allen, and I am an interviewer for the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. for the Veterans History Project. The project is conducted in Southwest Ohio by the Cincinnati-Hamilton County Public Library under the direction of Brian Powers. And we are here today at 3999 State Route 55 in Urbana, Ohio, at the home of Russell G. Arnold. And today is August the 30th. And Mr. Arnold, first of all, let me thank you for doing this interview.
Okay, well, you'll see when you get done whether you want to keep it.
Our cameraman today is Jim O'Donnell, and Jim is happens to be a Navy veteran, and he helps me on a number of these videos. So, Mr. Arnold, give us your full name, please.
Russell G. Arnold.
What's the G stand for?
Gilbert.
All right. And when and where were you born?
Dayton, Ohio, 1926.
What month and day, if you remember?
October 28th, 1926.
So you're going to be what, 97 come October?
Right.
Congratulations.
97. If I make it to the end.
Congratulations. What were your parents' names?
One was Harold Arnold, and my mother was Margaret.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Ricketts.
Do you remember about how your mom and dad met each other? Look at Jim. Look at Jim.
I do not know what the time was. They were both in Springfield, Ohio, so that's where they were at.
What did your dad do? What kind of job did he have?
He was known as a punch press operator years ago, which was a long time ago, and then we lived at Enon, and Enon, he was a farmhand there. That's back when things were pretty tough.
Do you remember what company he worked for as a punch press operator?
He worked at Bauer Brothers one time, in Springfield one time.
All right. And he also was a farmhand?
Yes, Enon, Ohio.
How far did he go in school?
I don't know, 7th or 8th grade, you reckon? Janet, you know, have any idea? I don't know.
All right, and they got married when?
1923.
September the 15th? That's what I have here. September 15, 1923.
She knows better than I do.
All right, did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one brother, 2 years older, and I got a sister sitting over there.
And what's your sister's name?
Janet.
What's her last name?
Now or then?
Now?
What do you go by now? Hill? Janet Hill.
And your brother, what was his name?
Harold.
And he's passed away?
Yes.
And he was 2 years older?
Yes.
What did Harold do?
He was a engineer, like he worked on moonshots and a few things like that. What kind of engineer that? Electronics engineer.
And where did he live?
Lived in California.
How long ago did he pass away, if you remember, Russ?
What date?
97.
97.
1997?
Yes, he was
Alrighty.
72 years old.
And I've got, we usually don't tell the ladies' age, but I've got Janet down here as 81. Is that about right?
Not yet.
Pardon?
Not yet.
80.
Going to be 81? Where did you live after you were born? Where was the family residing?
Most of the time we lived, well, I mean, when I was growing up, I lived in Enon. I lived in Enon till I was 8 years old. And then we moved to Springfield.
Where'd you go to school in Enon?
Enon School.
Back in those days, was that a one-room school, or did
No, it was a regular school. I think the building's still there yet. They've built new schools around it.
Then your family moved to Springfield?
Yes, we lived there 2 years, I think, in Springfield.
Why did the family move to Springfield?
Well, that's where the work was. He went there to work.
Your dad?
Yes.
And you were there 2 years, then where did you go?
We moved to Terre Haute, which is close here. We moved out here in the country. She lives on the over there where we grew up.
So is that where you spent the rest of your teenage years?
Yes,
Where'd you go to high school?
in Terre Haute and also Westville, and then I graduated from Springfield.
Back in those days, was there a Springfield North and Springfield South, or was there just one Springfield High School?
One Springfield High School,
What year did you graduate?
1944.
While you were going to school, Russ, is that right to call you Russ?
That's a good idea.
Okay.
I'll know what you're talking about then.
While you were going to school, did you work any place after school, or weekends, or holidays?
At home, we had a farm and a small tractor, and I did some handyman work, stuff like that.
How many acres was on the farm?
Oh, ours was only small, very small, 16 acres, but I worked for farmers, other farmers.
All right. So in the summer times, would you be working on the farms?
Yes.
What did you do after you graduated from high school?
I don't really remember all the things. Mainly worked on a farm, helped different farmers.
Well, you were born in 26, and the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in 41. Do you remember learning about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Well, I'll tell you how it was. I was in southern Ohio the day it was bombed, and the next day we came to Columbus, Ohio, and we found out they'd bombed, so we were a day late, technically, to find out about it. Down the hills where we were in Athens, Ohio, why we didn't get that news too quick.
Were you just down there in southern Ohio on business? You didn't live down there.
No, it was a friend of I had a buddy, my buddy's mother and grandmother had friends down there.
All right.
Outside of Athens.
So, what was your mom and dad's reaction to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, if you remember?
I do not recall
Okay.
I'm sure they were shocked. My dad was World War I veteran
Well, what was he in?
in the Army.
Where did he serve, if you know?
Well, he got as far as France. He said you could hear the bombings and all the activity.
Did he have any military injuries?
No,
Do you remember what his rank was?
I think, what was it? Any rank, I think he was private.
Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Do you know how many years he served in the Army?
I do not know. I suppose 1.5 years, 2 years.
Do you have anything around the house that shows what unit he was in?
We'd have trouble finding it. We got pictures of him and all that stuff.
So you graduated high school in 44, and were you drafted into the military, or did you volunteer?
Well, let me tell you the story. That is, when I was 17 years of age, I decided I'm going to be a P-51 pilot. That was my objective.
That's
so
one of my favorite planes.
I took a test to get into the Air Force and passed the test, and then I had to take a physical. So I went to Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and took a physical. And when the doctor came out, all of us outside, he said, "Which one of you guys is Arnold?" I said, "That's me." Anyway, he says, "You didn't pass. You got a spot on your lung." Just a spot. It was calcium or whatever you want to call it. So I flunked that test, and I later on, I went to the Army after I was inducted, and they took a bigger X-ray. He said, "You're all right. Keep going."
So after you got in the Army, they decided you were okay, but not good enough to be a P-51 pilot.
That's right. Right. You couldn't fly an airplane if you had a spot on your lung.
Was that pretty much of a disappointment that you didn't get to? try
Oh
to
yeah,
get
I was ambition. I say, oh, P-51 was beautiful back in those days. Unbelievable.
What was it in your past that made you feel like you wanted to be a P-51 pilot?
Well, I think just seeing the airplane, that was enough. That airplane was great.
So you failed the test at Fort Thomas, and did they send you home, or did they send you somewhere else?
Sent me home.
How long were you home before you went somewhere else?
Well, I was home until they drafted me in the Army. I was drafted, and then I was in the Army.
So when did you go into the Army? It was 1945. Do you remember what month?
I ended it in the Army in February of '45. I was 18 in 1944, and they didn't call me into the service for a little over 3 months, which made me into February. And in February I was drafted, had to go to Columbus, Ohio, and then from there we went.
Where'd you go in Columbus? Was that Fort Hayes? Was that Fort Hayes in Columbus?
I think so.
All right.
Yeah, everybody went through the same place there.
Then where'd you go?
Camp Atterbury, Indiana.
How long were you at Atterbury?
I suppose about 2 weeks at the most.
Did you get any training at Atterbury?
No.
What did you do there?
Well, I looked at the cooks we had, and guess what? They were German. German prisoners of war served us our food. Isn't that amazing?
Did they speak English?
I think so. I think so.
Did you have any interaction with any of the German servers?
No, just the fact that they served us our food on the chow line. They were big strapping fellows. I mean, they were from North Africa, probably what had been in the Africa Corps, and we captured a lot of Germans in Africa.
Can you remember anything about their age? Were these young guys or middle age?
Oh, they were. The guy I know that served us food probably was 30. Big strapping. He made me look like a little boy. And then they had, every camp I went to, they had some PWs also. Like when I went to Alabama to basic training, why they had a number of German prisoners.
So did you go to Alabama from Atterbury?
Yes.
What camp was it down there, if you remember?
It was at Anniston, Alabama, and I can't recall the exact name of the training camp, but it was.
How long were you there in Alabama?
I think the course was 16 weeks. I was there when Roosevelt died, and we were out in the field, and we had to come back and parade as a result of Roosevelt passing away.
What were your feelings when you learned that President Roosevelt had died?
No particular deal. Just, we said, hey, that's another, and we assumed he was old, but he wasn't that old. He really wasn't too old.
Well, when you were in Alabama, the war is still going on over in Europe and in the Pacific.
That's right.
Did you anticipate that you were going to be participating in combat?
Without a doubt. That's what I was trained for.
What kind of training did you get down there in Alabama?
Well, definitely infantry training, And that was, the whole cadre was strictly for training for infantry.
What kind of weapons were you trained to use?
Well, we had everything from, we did shoot a few M30s, 30 caliber machine guns, and mainly we had the Garand rifle.
Did you learn how to disassemble your rifle and put it back together again?
I'm sure I did, because I ended up expert marksman, not expert. I was a sharpshooter.
On what weapon?
The rifle, the Garand rifle. Matter of fact, one of the generals said that rifle won the war. One of the best guns they had.
Mm-hmm. How were the accommodations there in Alabama, as far as where you lived?
Well, we had a regular, I call it a hut. It was a building with about, I suppose there were 15 or 16 of us in each one of those huts.
Were they bunk beds or single beds?
They were single beds.
How was the food?
No problem. I could, I got along good with it. I lost 20 or 30 pounds by exercise and all that stuff. And
where did you go from Alabama?
I came home and on leave and ended up going west. I can't tell you what's the name of the camp out there. And then we were there a couple of days, and we were shipped to the West Coast to Fort Ord, California. And we got some more training out there.
How long were you home on leave?
I suppose a little over a week, maybe 10 days.
Did you have a girlfriend at that time?
No.
Did you have a girlfriend in high school?
No.
Okay. So what more training did you have out at Fort Ord?
They took us out for more target practice, I guess you'd say. We carried a rifle and all that stuff out into the, I call it the desert, but it was mountainous and all that stuff, so it was.
Did you have any extended hikes when you were out there at Fort Ord?
We went out into the mountains. I'll say it that way. We walked up the hills, and as I remember, the dust would come up, and you go back at night, you had dust clear up to your knees. It was pretty dry out there.
How many miles were some of those hikes?
I have no idea. I suppose 2 or 3 mile.
Did you carry any equipment on your back?
No, not that I remember. We carried a rifle.
While you were there at Fort Ord, or when you were back there in Alabama, did you communicate with your mom and dad? By letter?
Sure I did. I'm sure I did. You send a letter and say, "Hey, I'm still here."
What was your older brother doing at the time?
He was in the Marine Corps. He was in Guam in the Marines.
Did he make it through the war?
Oh yes, it was anti-aircraft was his specialty, I think, in the what he did for the Marines, I think.
Did you talk to him about his service at all?
Well, just in general, nothing special. He wasn't technically in combat, but he was there and used his anti-aircraft to realize that they could be attacked.
All right.
But he was there during the war.
Now, was he drafted or did he enlist?
He enlisted.
Did he ever tell you why he chose the Marines?
No, I think that back in those days, why there's quite a few of us thought the Marines were the right place to be.
Well, some of the guys I've interviewed, they say they joined the Marines because they liked the uniform.
Oh, yeah, that could be. They had a beautiful blue uniform afterwards, but I never saw my brother in a blue uniform.
All right, so you had more shooting training out of Fort Ord. Then where did you go from Fort Ord?
Camp Stoneman, which is up the coast above Frisco.
Stillman?
Stoneman.
Stoneman, okay. How long were you at Stoneman?
I suppose a week or two. I really don't remember the date, time-wise.
You remember training?
We didn't have too much training there. We eventually got on the ferry and went down to San Francisco, and got on a ship. I got on the ship August the 10th.
What ship was it?
The Extavia.
Can you spell that for me?
No, but I can get it out there. We got a picture of it out there.
What kind of ship was it? Just a troop transport?
It was a troop for a small number. There were probably 1,400 or 1,500 of us all that was on that ship.
Where did you ship out to?
I shipped to the Philippine Islands, and would you believe it took us 30 days to get there.
When you were on your way to the Philippines, did you have a convoy, or was your ship by itself?
Single ship. But 30 days seemed like a long time.
How about the weather? Did you have any bad weather?
No, not real bad. All those ships went up and down.
Had you ever been on board ship before?
No.
Did you get sick at all?
No, but I got to the place where I had to go topside rather than being sick. If you're down there where the food was or the smell was, why, pretty quick you noticed it, and you said, I'm going topside and get some
fresh
air.
What were your accommodations on board ship? Were they...
There's about 5 decks or 5 bunks, and one above the other.
And which one were you on?
I don't remember, but I wasn't the top one. I know that. Yeah.
How was your ability to sleep with the ship rocking and rolling?
There was no problem. You get used to it finally. Even though other people were sick, why if you go up topside where the air was, I survived. I did not get sick, but 90% of the guys on the ship got sick, and maybe 98%.
How was the food on board?
Well, I tell you this, Spam, I don't eat Spam yet. I had it 3 meals a day. 3 meals a day. Either a sandwich or something for breakfast. We'd have something as a dish of, maybe something else with it, but we had Spam.
Spam and eggs for breakfast?
We had Navy. I think Navy, you say beans. They have beans. Anyway, the end result, I haven't eaten any Spam since. It was 3 times a day, nothing else. We never had any other meat of any kind.
Did you have any fruit or vegetables?
I don't remember what we had, but I know Navy was big on beans. They thought beans was most important.
All right. So after 30 days, where did your ship land there in the Philippines?
Tacloban. That's a training. It was a cadre place where they brought soldiers in, and then I was there, I suppose, less than a week, and they put us on a ship, and we went to the southern Philippines, as far south as you can go, and called Davao City.
D-U-V-A-L?
D-A-V-A-O or something, Davao.
Oh.
Davao City. After the war, we found out that years before that, the Japanese, there was as many Japanese there as there were Filipinos.
As citizens or an occupation?
No, these were strictly, they were occupying the country to work and all.
Okay.
The Japanese were, but they wasn't there when I got there. They had started bringing them in.
Now, at Tacloban, you were only there about a week?
I'm sorry?
At Tacloban, you were only there about a week?
Yeah.
Were you on shore or still on ship?
On shore. onshore.
Did you have any interaction on shore with any of the Filipinos?
Yes, no, not at Tacloban I didn't. But
Okay.
when I went to the southern Philippines, I did.
Was there any war damage there at Tacloban?
Well, you couldn't see it. We were in barracks or in buildings or in tents, I'd say, that we were in tents there. So we weren't there too long.
All right, so then you get to Davao City, Davao?
It took 3 days from there to get to the southern Philippines, and that was Davao City.
Was that the same ship you went on?
No, no.
What ship did you go on those 3 days?
I don't know, LCI or something. It was a small ship. Could have been an LCS or something. LCI probably.
Landing Craft Infantry?
Yeah, that's. I'm not sure, but that's probably what it was. We only had a few guys on there. I don't know how many we had on there. We was only on it 3 days.
How was that trip for 3 days?
Nice cruise down the coast.
Well, by that time, had that area been cleared out of any Japanese submarines or aircraft?
Apparently, because the war was over by the time I got to the southern Philippines.
Okay. Where were you when you learned that Japan had surrendered?
I was out in the middle of the ocean on the way to the Philippines.
Was there a celebration on board ship?
Oh yeah, they fired off 5 millimeter or something. Big guns on the ship.
What was your reaction, your personal reaction to learning that Japan had surrendered?
It just saved some of us. That's all. A lot of us survived because of that.
Mm-hmm.
The group they got in there before us in the Philippines, where I went, they were ambushed on the way up to the front. They got a bunch of them killed going, and that was a month or so before I got there.
How did you learn about that?
Well, it was common knowledge at the where I was.
Do you remember anything about how they got ambushed or how many fellows died?
No. They just said, "Hey, you're lucky you came in." Technically, it was right after the war, and we had Japanese were lined up. They had brought some in, they'd brought them in. They were surprised how big we were. They couldn't believe that 18 years old, we were 6 feet tall,
And all the Japanese that you encountered were relatively short?
Yes. I didn't see any of them from northern Hokkaido. That's where they said they had big ones up there.
Well, what can you tell us about your experiences there in the Philippines?
Well, we went out, and every once in a while, the Filipinos would do something we didn't think was right, so we'd go out and we didn't raid it, but we'd take some of the stuff they had messed up or something. They were good. You could find kids that had bank rolls of money, and they'd buy anything from you. They'd like clothing or bed clothing or something. It was a surprise to find out how they would try to get anything the Americans would sell them, and guys would sell them anything they wanted.
Well, do you know how the little kids got their money?
Huh?
Do you know how the children got their money?
No, they were good at it.
Was that American dollars?
No, Filipino money. The Japanese had made invasion money. I've even got some. They had already printed for the whole invasion that they did. They had already set up their currency situation.
All right. How long were you there in South Philippines?
Just about a month. We got word to go to Japan right away.
Well, while you're there at Davao City, you talked about some of the Filipinos. You'd have to go out and see what they were doing wrong. What are some of the things that the Filipinos were causing trouble with?
Oh, I don't know. Just causing trouble. They wanted to buy anything you got, wanted to do.
Was there any theft involved?
Any what?
Theft. They try to steal anything?
Oh, I suppose they did. I didn't get involved in that, but they'd buy anything they had. Some of the guys sold them their blankets and stuff like that, but they were good at making things suitable for them. That's where I learned that they have bananas, but bananas were 2 or 3 different kinds of bananas. I didn't realize that till they had some bananas that they weren't good for eating. They were cooking bananas, and we'd buy off the population there, and we bought, you can buy, for 25 cents, you could buy a whole bunch of bananas, you know. Anyway, it was interesting.
So when you're there in the Philippines, you're having some fruit and you're not having all Spam, is that right?
Yeah.
What kind of food did you have while you were there?
I'll tell you what I got when I was in the service. They had fruit salad in a can, you know, fruit salad. And that was a luxury back here in the United States. It was a luxury, fruit salad. Over there we had fruit salad any place or anytime you wanted it. It was, you know what I mean, they had
Sure.
grapes and everything in a can, but
Pears and oranges and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, it was everything in a can, but we had a lot of it. I never saw so much when I was a kid, and I said that was a luxury, you know, but the end result was that over there the Army had somebody shipped them enough to supply all of us.
So how do you look at that fruit salad now? Do you ever eat that now?
The only thing I don't eat is Spam. I haven't had any Spam since I came home. My wife said, "I don't understand why you do. Why you worry about that." I said, "Hey, I had Spam 3 meals a day, and the end result was that I no longer desire to eat Spam."
So where did you go from the South Philippines? What was your next duty?
We went to Japan right away. Within a month after the war was over, we were slated to go to Japan.
How did you get there?
On board a ship.
Do you remember the name of the ship?
No, I don't.
What kind of ship was it?
Well, it was a cargo, so we could load our stuff on there and took off and went to Japan.
Was it cargo and troops or just cargo?
Troops, that was troops.
All right.
My division went there.
The whole division?
I don't know what the whole division, I presume it was the whole division because my division ended up in Japan.
What division? Were you in the 24th Infantry?
Yes. 24th Infantry Division. I was in the military police. And
Where did you get training to be an MP?
where I landed there.
Okay. Where did your ship dock there at Japan?
Matsuyama. I got all these maps to show you. Each time we'll show you where we got.
All right.
We ended up at Matsuyama and was there about 3 months, and we went inland about 6 miles, and we had a tent set up. Somebody had done some of this ahead of time, and very interesting because the city had been burnt to a crisp.
What city?
Well, it would be Matsuyama, but actually the part we were in, I've got a map here and I can't find that name. I said the name was Dogo, and we were in that part of it. I'll show you some pictures after a while and you'll say, oh, okay.
But did it look like Matsuyama had been firebombed?
Completely. It wasn't anything there except a couple cement buildings. We used one of them for a headquarters, and it had been an eye clinic. And after we were there a short time, they came one of they could dig up in the yard, dig the medicine they had buried in the yard. They knew obviously it was going to get bombed, if Curtis LeMay had been left do what he wanted to do, they'd have burnt every city in Japan down. Every city. Nobody ever heard of some of these cities they talk about. You know, they just.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis LeMay finally got so that he sent his airplanes in at 10,000 feet. The guy said, we're all going to get killed. And they bombed and very effectively.
Do you know if Matsuyama was any kind of a key military area?
No, the city I got to later, which was, I went to Okayama and then I went to Kokura, and Kokura was considered one of the possible properties that the atomic bomb would be used on, and they decided to use Hiroshima. And I have no idea why they used Hiroshima, because if you look on the map, it's amazing.
When you were at Matsuyama for 3 months, what were your duties there?
We went out on the town, I guess you say. We checked, we went different places in our Jeeps and checked on people.
Checked on your men or checked on the citizens?
Mostly our men, because they'd get a little out of hand.
How did you have any interaction with Japanese citizens?
Oh yes, I'll tell you what was the most amazing when we got there. At one, not that first city, but when we got to the second or third city, the Japanese had come back from California. The people that had been interned in California, they came back, and I said they spoke better English than we did. They were we knew, got association with the girls, and I say girls, they were 15 to 18 years old or something like that, and we ended up not at the first place, but at the third place I was at, where we'd go out and have dinner on the town, you might say.
Uh-huh. And how was the food when you went out for dinner on the town?
Excellent. I've been trying to get some since.
How was the food in camp?
It was okay. I mean, we didn't know. The thing that's the most amazing is that when we threw our garbage out, the guy that took the garbage, the Japanese guy take the garbage, he sold it and he was a millionaire.
Really?
We'd see him downtown. He's partially drunk, and they said, "Oh, he's got more money than anybody else. He'd sell the
scrap, huh?"
Yeah. Well, the truth is, the Japanese were starving.
Sure.
The first town I went to, my parents sent me an article that there was a food riot at this town, and I was within a mile of where it said it was at, and I never saw anything of it. They had a food riot, they called it. Yeah, it was amazing. That's the first town. Then I went to a second town, which was Okayama.
Well, where's this place when you were 6 miles out of town and in a tent? Was that in Matsuyama?
Technically, yes. I can't find the name that we called it, Dogo, D-O-G-O, but I can't find it on the map as a name of the town.
Well, how long were you there at Dogo?
I suppose 3 months.
Did you have the same duties there? Just
checking on things, what was going on. I'll show you what one of the interesting things is. At Dogo, that is a castle, 400 years old when we were there. And that was so that if you'd have been there, you could have watched the whole fire, because it was up on a very high area.
Away from all the other damage?
Yes, it was definitely without the other damage. And here's also 2 ladies that came to our camp quickly after we got there. Those ladies were missionaries, and the end result was that we were privates and stuff. We sent them into the officers, so we don't know what but they had been missionaries over there all during the war. This is where
Were these a couple of Japanese of Japanese origin?
no, they were American missionaries.
Okay. Now, they dealt mainly with the officers?
Yeah, we sent them in, the officers. We didn't have any. They probably came for like to have a good meal. Probably.
Okay. Other than that, you didn't have any interaction with them?
No, but I got pictures of them. That's all, and I got these, and I didn't have any action with them. That's right.
And now, what's this a picture of?
Well, right down at the bottom here is where we had tents, and if you look there, you can't see it, but clear up on the hill is where this castle is. This castle was up there, and it would have been the prime area to be at when they burnt the whole city down. You could have had a front row seat, but this was 400 years old when I was there, and now it's probably 500 years old. It was quite well built.
Russ, what's this building in the middle of the photograph?
That was one of their city buildings. We were down here, and we were in wasn't in it because we had tents down here. All these were tents where we lived. But there was the building we used was an eye clinic, and it was cracked. Heat had cracked it and all that. And we had a few of the main guys were in there running business for the military police. And then we lived out here in tents. All these were tents down here that we lived in.
Those were down at the bottom of the photo, but there in the middle of the photo, that big building there, was that a concrete building? Is that why it wasn't burned?
That's right. And then over here on the left of this, to the left, there was a hospital that had been burnt, but it was still standing, but it wasn't usable. The building we were in, a small, very small, like a story and a half, 2-story at the most, was an eye clinic. And we weren't there too long. They wanted to know if they could dig up the medicine and stuff they had put in the ground.
Now, what was that building that's shown in that photograph used for by the Americans or by us?
We didn't use that building. That was a city building for them. That wasn't.
But had it been used by the Japanese, do you know?
I don't know what it was actually for what kind of a building it was, because to our left here actually was a hospital that had been burnt, and we didn't even go into that building. We didn't use that building at all.
Let me see that again.
Everything we had was tents and.
Let me see that again.
But you can't see it, but that castle's up on top of the hill there.
Now he's indicating the tents down here on the lower right.
Yeah.
And the hospital was still further over.
It was
off of the picture.
Yes.
And the large building in the photo was the city building for the Filipinos.
For the Japanese.
But it had been a city building for the Filipinos. Do you know what it had been used for by the Filipinos?
No, I don't know if there's any Filipinos there at all.
Okay.
Wasn't any there. They were all Japanese.
And the castle was on the top of the mountain, the hill. That's
actually, it's up there, but it's hard to see.
Yeah.
If you look real close, there's something up there on the top of the picture, and that's his castle. Was up there. We were impressed. In the grounds around this building, they had a well. It was probably 6 feet across, and I don't know how deep it was. We didn't go down in it, but it was interesting. I suppose that was when they had 400 years ago. They probably needed it, but they had gun slits and they had other things in this. It was a fortress at one time.
So they had gun emplacements around the castle?
They had slits there that you could see that whatever they used back in those 400 years ago.
Oh, okay. But had the Japanese during their occupation, had they fortified that at all? Do you know?
No. We walked through it and all that. like I said, I think the castle was one of these up here.
So, when did you get to Kahura?
When did we get to what?
Kahura?
Kokura?
Kokura?
We went to Okayama next. We went from this place. We probably there about, I suppose, 6 weeks or better. We were at Matsuyama technically, and then we went across the Japanese Sea, it said, and then we went to Okayama. I'll show you the map here after a bit. I'll show you how we did that.
All right, what did you do at Okayama?
You know, I don't know what we did except I was on patrol all the time. We went back and forth, probably 8 or 10 miles out of town, and the military officers apparently had control of some of the factories around there. Some of the Americans had control. We didn't do anything with the Japanese per se, as far as now I should have told you in the first place we went where these two ladies were, the Japanese had to turn in all their swords, and the building I was in had a room that was completely full of swords or guns or anything else that they were told they had to turn in. And I foolishly did not send home any real nice quality guns or swords, but they had some that were just beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. You know, they were big and looked like fingernail polish on them. They had that red on them. But I sent 2 swords home later because they said, if you don't get one of these swords now, we're going to take them out and dump them in the ocean. So that's what they did.
Oh, wow. So how did you have any interaction with the Filipinos? Not Filipinos, the Japanese? While you were over there?
Always.
How did they treat you?
Excellent. I mean, we had no problems at all. It was amazing to us, the people that had been in the Philippines fighting and all of that. And when we got up there, they had been told that they lost, and they treated us fine, and we treated them good. We didn't give them any trouble, and they didn't give us any trouble.
Did you have any interaction with Japanese who had been in the military?
Well, yeah, we've talked to some, and one guy had a scarf, you know. One time he says, I got shot out airplane, that was a part of my parachute, and stuff like that. But we didn't know how many had been in the military. Obviously, thousands of them.
Well, what all did you do there at Okayama? What were your experiences there?
Well, I guess we did. Evidently the higher ups at Okayama apparently had made arrangements to collect or decide what to do with the Japanese people per se, and apparently they knew where some of these factories were and stuff like that. So we, as the military police, did not have any direct action with the population or with the factories and things like that. We didn't go into factories, and some of the military did. We used to have our clothes cleaned, and they'd use the fuel that the Japanese had and cleaned our clothing, you know, any wool, something like that. It was amazing.
Do you have any discussions with any Japanese that indicated they were ready to fight to the last person if they invaded Japan?
There was no indication of that. They just talked like any civilian. Actually, they didn't act like they were a soldier or anything.
Had Okayama been destroyed in any aspects by bombing, or?
There was not nearly as much visibility there of that. As the first town I went to, it was completely burnt down. You could see a mile, 2 miles any direction, and it was all burned. It was completely burned down. And Okayama still had buildings. We used some of the buildings and all that stuff, like it had been maybe a military area, because we used several of the buildings to live in.
When you lived in those buildings, what would you have, cots, or did you have beds, or what?
Just cots. We always had cots.
While you were in any of these Japanese cities and you're on duty, how many hours a day were you on duty?
Probably 8 or 10, just, whatever. Everything we did was in a Jeep. We'd go someplace in a Jeep, or vice versa, there. We did no walking tours or anything like that. We were in Jeeps.
While you were in the Philippines, did you have any USO visitors?
No.
How about in Japan?
Yes, we had some there.
Do you know who came?
Some troop came in and sang or something, whatever it was they did, but...
You didn't see Bob Hope at all?
No, I didn't, and we had some other outfits that came in and entertained some, but we didn't see much of that. Very, very limited, but we did see some groups that came in.
While you were in the Philippines, were you able to communicate with your parents by phone or letter?
Oh, I am sure we sent letters back, back and forth.
Were your letters censored at all, do you know? Or?
I don't know, as they were censored at that time.
Because the war was over by the time you got to the Philippines.
Yeah, definitely.
How about when you were in Japan, did you communicate with your folks?
Well, I wrote once in a great while. It was very seldom, but I wrote to them and had people in here that wrote to me back there also, wrote when I was over there.
Where did you go after Okayama?
We went to Kokura, which is on a different island. They had 3 islands or 4. They called them islands, but they were just different parts of the Japanese Empire.
What did you do at Kokura?
Well, mainly, I guess I was on the biggest thing the military police do. It was taking care of, be sure that the GIs didn't get into too much trouble. I arrested, for example, one guy. He'd been in a Japanese hospital molesting people. For example, he molested them. So we arrested him and got him out of there.
Do you know what he was doing when he was molesting these people?
I don't know. He just was...
just harassing them?
He was a harassment, so we got him out quick. That's one of the arrests I made. I was in the military police a long time, and I can count all the people I arrested on one hand, and I can tell you I probably 2 hands, a lot of the people that I got that I took back to camp, and they were tickled to death to go back to camp because they knew the direction we were going was the military police headquarters, and before we got there, I'd tell my driver, I'd go like this, and we'd take them back to camp. They were, oh boy, they were relieved. They were tickled to death.
What would happen to them if they went to where you had started, where they thought you were going?
I'm sorry?
What would happen to them if they were taken to where you started?
Well, they'd probably had to go to our building. We had a building which was the military police headquarters, and I only took one guy there one time, and that's all. The rest of them I took them back into camp, and I always tell people I saved one guy's life. These guys would go out and have familiarity with the Japanese women. Anyway, I got this 2 guys one night, and I always tell this story. I got these 2 fellas, and they were where they weren't supposed to be. So we took them back, and the question you ask, you guys want to go to the pro station? And one guy says, I don't need to. The other guy says, yeah, I'll go. So I took him to the pro station. Well, the Japanese would go pick up the girls that were involved, and they sent them to what we call the clap shack. Anyway, the end result was we got a report back on the fellow that I'm talking about. That girl he had 3 diseases. And he happy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. I said I saved that guy's life probably.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd pick up different ones, but as a rule, we had nightclubs for the GIs, and there'd be Japanese there also, and usually we'd stop at there's 2 or 3 of those clubs that we got familiar with, and tried to keep the GIs from getting in trouble. That's all.
Uh-huh. Anybody in your particular unit ever have any problems where they got discharged at all?
No, we had some that got sent to other outfits because they were stealing our own guys' clothing. You're meaning that?
Our men were stealing our own other men's clothing?
Yeah, at the camp. Well, they'd be at laundry or something, you know. So they'd ended up. They finally found out that hey, that actually belongs to the other guys. So they'd found out who was doing it. They sent him to the infantry. We were not infantry.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a story. You find why would the guys do that? We don't know. You know, they weren't the kind of guys you want to have in your outfit.
How long were you at Kokura?
Probably over a year. That was the last place I was at, and I was there for a long time.
Where did you go from Kokura?
I came home.
How did you get home?
Well, I took the train and went up through Hiroshima and all those places and got back to Tokyo, or outside of Tokyo. And the end result was that I got on a ship there and came home from there.
How about Tokyo? Had that been bombed, the area that you saw?
Oh, yeah, various places. But the end result was that the military elected not to bomb Tokyo's emperor's property. Matter of fact, I talked to guys that were in the Navy since, and they said we were ordered to stay away from that. And I was there different times. A couple times I was in Tokyo, and I saw what they were talking about. It was a nice big area, you know, that was not bombed at all. Other places was pretty well bombed.
How about Hiroshima? What'd that look like when you got there?
Everybody asked me that same question, and I said, looked like all the other towns. It was just burnt down. There's one, actually. Now, we had a girl in our outfit that is a telephone operator or something like that, and you know, she was Japanese, but she was from, well, it's confusing. She was from the States. She got married in Japan, and her husband, she tells the story that her husband was on a ship, and we sank the ship, and she says 3 people got off the ship. My husband wasn't one of them. So that's one of my stories I have. That. So anyway, later on I found out, and that's several of these people, 99% of the people that were back there from the United States, because they were interned, you know, during the war, they were interned.
Sure.
And they thought the United States was terrible. However, when they got back to Japan, they found out that Japan didn't want them. They called them traitors.
For living in the States.
They moved to the States, so the Japanese didn't like them, and they said, hey, they were traitors. They left a long time ago. Anyway, the end result was that while I was down there,
down where?
In Kokura, this guy here, that's a general.
All right, let Jim get this picture on here.
That's General Eichelberger.
And who's with him?
Some other military, and
But it's not you.
No. Yes, one of the. Let me see. That's me. That's me.
You and the general.
Yes, and the general.
Now, what was the purpose of this photo?
He says, "I want to take a picture with you because you're from my hometown."
really?
Yeah, he's from Urbana. He grew up in Urbana and went to West Point in around 1900, and he actually was the commandant of West Point when MacArthur called him and says, "Come over here, I want somebody to do some fighting." But I'll tell you how that happened, and that was, I was told that the general was coming down by train, and I took several guys down there, and you make an appearance as military police. We go stand around looking, and the train came in, and the general got off with some other people, and he walked straight over to me for no particular. I probably was noticed I was a staff sergeant at that time, but anyway. When he came over to me, he said, "How long you been in this outfit?" And I said, "Well, about 18 months. And I said, "Aren't you from Urbana?" And he lit up like a Christmas tree. He called two other generals over and said, "This guy's from my hometown." And later on, this picture here was taken at our headquarters, the military police headquarters. I didn't even sleep there. I slept downtown, a better place. And the end result was that he said, "Come over here, I want to take a picture with you." That's after he did an inspection and came back. And then he says, "If you get to Tokyo, stop and see me." So the end result was took prisoners. I took 5 GIs up to Sagamo prison later, and I went over to his office, and WAC captain, she said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Well, I'd like to see the general." And it wasn't 2 seconds, he was out. "Arnold, how are you? Come on in." He said, "Did you ever get those pictures?" This picture was taken at Kokura. And I said, "No." And he ripped off a statement. He said, "Hey, see this man? I was out there. Where's the pictures?" And it wasn't 2 minutes she had them. And he autographed that. See, it's autographed down at the bottom there.
Yeah, it says, "For Russell Arnold, warm regards." Was it Robert Eichelberger?
Yes.
It says Yokohama, June of '67.
That's where I got it. The picture was taken in Kokura, but his office was in Yokohama.
Okay.
Yeah. But he's from Urbana. Actually, it's where he grew up. He went from here to West Point back in 1900. And when MacArthur, he was in charge of West Point at that time. And MacArthur says, "I want somebody over here who wants to do some fighting." And he called this guy to come over, and he fought all the way up to the Pacific till he got to Japan, I guess you'd say. Interesting.
So were you treated any better after people knew that you were friends with Eichelberger?
No, my major that was in charge of the office, he said, "That guy knows the general. That guy knows the general." And I got a picture, and that wasn't one of these, but I got one that he's pointing at me, and the picture was taken, and he says, "Well, he knew the general." I didn't know the general, but the general knew where I was from.
Uh-huh. All right, so do you remember what ship it was? What ship it was you came back on?
I should be able to. USS Pope, I think. Whatever the name of the ship was. I got pictures of it someplace.
Well, here's a photo.
That's our group. That's the military police.
Where was this taken? Kokura?
Yeah, doesn't it say on there?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, what was amazing about it was that I was 19 years old finally, and when I was 19, I was the second in charge. We had a we had the guy that was the first sergeant, but he was only a staff sergeant, and I became a staff sergeant. There's only 2 staffs we had. They were not any people higher than staff sergeants in the platoon.
And you're 19 years old?
Yeah, I actually was, I looked at my papers here recently, and I was assigned. So I was a sergeant of the guard at 19, and we had guys in there 40 years old. Some of them were World War II guys and all. But I was really surprised that I looked at my record. I was made a staff sergeant, and there's only two, one inside and I was outside as a line sergeant, I call it. And yeah, I looked, oh, I got that when I was 19 years old.
Where were you when you got the promotion to staff sergeant?
Kukura.
How long did it take the ship to get you back home?
6 or 8 days, they said to me, made a record crossing. I think 8 days.
Where did the ship come to?
It was Yokohama, and we went to Seattle.
How long were you in Seattle before you started home?
Just a few days. We went to a camp there. I get mixed up which camp it was, but we went to a camp, and they processed us, and finally I got on I want to say a travel trailer. I wanted to see the country, so I got a bus. I got on a bus to come home. Every place I wanted to see, it was dark. I traveled day and night. I said, hey, that been a place. I stopped in Denver because some of the guys that was in my outfit had left the same time I did, and they were gracious enough to take us around Denver, and so we got to see more than we would have had we not had friends from Denver.
Uh-huh.
It was quite a trip.
Well, how long did it take you to get home finally from
Seattle?
Seattle?
I come by bus, I suppose 3 days or 4, between 3 and 4 days.
Where did you come to? Where did the bus bring you?
Dayton, Ohio.
Anybody from the family meet you in Dayton?
That's how I got home. My aunt, I had her come get me and took me home, brought me home.
How did she know you were going to be there at a certain time?
I don't know. Well, whether I suppose I called her when I got there, probably.
Where'd your aunt live?
In Dayton proper.
So from Dayton, where did your aunt bring you?
Over where she lives, across the road there, or across the, at home, which is the next road over.
All right. So about what time of day did you actually get home where your parents were living?
I think it was definitely in the daytime. I know because I went up to the house, and my mom came to the door, and she was surprised to see me because I hadn't told them I was coming home.
What did she do?
Well, she just said hello.
Did she hug you or anything?
Oh, I don't think so. We weren't very that type of family. We didn't make
Not a lot of physical contact.
we didn't make much physical contact with each other.
How about Dad? Where was he? Was he working or was he home?
I don't know. Don't remember.
All right. Well, what did you do then after you got home? Did you get a job?
Well, I worked on the farm some, and I went to college pretty quick. Oh, I would like to tell this story. I had been a staff sergeant in charge of, I got a picture here of these guys. I was in charge of all these guys outside, you might say. See, there's only one guy in here, I think the Japanese interpreter, I think he was a staff sergeant one time. They sent him home. He got too familiar with the Japanese. But I ended up being responsible for them. I went from, when I got home, I had my dad take me to the state patrol. I said, hey, I've been in the military police, and I think maybe I'd make a good candidate to be in the state patrol. They said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 20. Forget it. You got to be 21. And I said, I was in charge of 200 guys over there outside, technically. And I always thought that was pretty good. I was too young. I had to be 21 before I could get into the state patrol. But in the meantime, I went to college in
Where'd you go to college?
Springfield, Wittenberg.
Wittenberg. That's where Jim went, our cameraman.
Is that right? What year?
1962.
62. I got out in 51.
What did you study there?
It was regular, I don't know what they call it, It wasn't anything special. It was
Just a liberal arts?
liberal arts is what it was. Yes.
So did you get a degree?
Yes, I got a degree. It says.
Did you work at all while you were going to college?
Yes, I did some farm work, and I that was basically, it's still farm work because I was out here, and if still farm work was available.
Now, home was close enough to Wittenberg that you could travel back and forth each day.
Yeah, I did.
So did you have the regular 4-year courses and you graduated in 4 years?
Yes.
When did you graduate?
1951.
What did you do after graduation as far as work?
Well, I think pretty soon I went to work for the government at Wright-Patterson, and I was there less than a year, and that outfit that I was with was supposed to go to Georgia and be whatever we did, which was clothing or something, and went to Georgia, and then my outfit that I was in at Wright-Patterson was supposed to go to Georgia. Well, I had been down there for 6 weeks training, and Georgia was still behind the times. I mean, we still had those places that said this is for white people only, and all those things, and
Still had the segregation going.
oh, it was definitely back then. 30 years later, I was down there going to Florida, and it looked like any other town. But when I was there in early 50s, why, it looked like Springfield did 25 or 30 years before that. And they were still pretty remote. They had, no fancy food or restaurants and all that stuff.
What town was it?
Macon, Georgia. Macon. And I went to the air base there, if I think of the name of the base. That's where I traveled from Macon out to every day 10 to a mile to the base where I was training technically.
Wright-Patterson was the Air Force Base east of Dayton.
It's half of Dayton. It's a north. it's a big outfit.
Right, in Fairborn, Ohio.
Yeah, and it covered there down towards Dayton. They had Area A, B, and C, all those.
What'd you do at Wright-Pat?
Well, I was in a outfit for a while that we bought clothing for the WACs. I think that's one of them. Anyway, after I was there a while, they decided they're going to Georgia, and I went to Shelby, Ohio, up here north, and I got a job there. So I didn't want to go back to Georgia. I thought it was still pretty remote. Georgia was, so I went to Shelby.
Now, Shelby is after Macon?
Yes, I went to Macon for a while, and then I went to Shelby because I quit where I was, you might say, and I went up there and got hired at Shelby, and I was there a little over a year, I guess, at Shelby, and I transferred down to Dayton Gentilly Air Force Base. Gentilly was named after one of our famous fighter pilots back years ago.
From Pickaway.
Don Gentilly.
He was from Pickaway.
Yeah. He got killed, but they told him he'd shot down enough German airplanes. He says, "Come home, we want you to stay safe." They'd start training him in a jet, and the jet crashed and killed him. Hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah. Make it through combat and then you get killed elsewise.
Yeah, he was. I think he was training to fly a jet or something, whatever it was. But the plane crashed, and sure enough, he died. And they got him out of Europe because he was too reckless. He had actually started out, I think, in Canadian Air Force because he couldn't get in here, and then he went over there and he shot down at least 25 German planes. He was one of the aces, and he and another guy, and they said, you guys have had enough of this. Go back to states and have war bond drives or something, something like that. So anyway, it's a darn shame, but he got killed flying an airplane for training purposes.
So you get a job there at Gentili?
Yeah, that's what I went from Shelby to Gentili.
Gentili. Now, where did you live when you were working at Gentili?
Over where she does, the next town over, next road over.
So you had a little bit of a drive every day.
36 miles.
What did you do at Gentili?
I was in methods and procedures. That's what it was called.
What did you do in methods and procedures?
Well, we're supposed to write instructions for people to follow, but it was a storage depot. I tell you what, people don't realize. Desi Gentili was built and used as a prisoner of war camp when we had Italians as prisoners.
In Second World War? Second World War?
Yeah, and they were not on our side to start with, the Italians
Right.
weren't. And people don't even, I talked to people that were Italians. I said, you realize that Desi at one time, which changed names 3 or 4 times, it was called Don Gentili at one time, something. But anyway, I said, you realize that was used as a prisoner of war camp at one time? And they said, well, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, they had Italian prisoners there, but they were so lax that these guys went out on the town, and the end result was that they met girls and stuff, and when they went back home, they turned around and came back and married those gals. They came back to Dayton.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they were obviously, when they surrendered, they were released, you might say, as prisoners. You might say, give them extra benefits of being free. And they shipped them home, and then they turned around and came back and married a couple gals in Dayton.
Well, how long were you at Gentili?
About 30 years.
Did you do the same thing all the time you were there?
Yes. Policy and procedures.
Well, I know you got married. What was your wife's name?
Zelpha.
Zelpha.
Right.
The last name was what?
Faulkner.
Faulkner.
Right. Yes.
When did you meet Zelpha?
Well, it's a little hard to explain that one. She went to school down the same place I went to school, Terry Hut, which is down here a block down, and we had no communications back then. But when I came home, she was still single, and I was single, and we finally somebody got us a date or something. So she lived right. That property across the road was her father's property. So I've known her all since I was going to school, but didn't have any connections with her really, as far as that's concerned. Very little. Till we had a date a couple times, and I guess then we went several years dating before I married her. She married me.
About 8 years.
Several years. We were married, 69 years?
Well, I've got a marriage date of May 15 of 1955. Is that right?
That's right. Right.
Good. When you came back home and then you started dating her, did she have a job anywhere?
Yeah, she worked at the bank in Urbana. Worked at Champaign Bank.
And during the time that you just dated before you got married with Zelpha, did she stay working at the bank?
She was there, yeah. I think she was there after we got married, actually, yeah.
Did you and Zelpha have any children?
3,
What were their names?
John, Mark, and Scott.
John was born when?
What? 50,
I've got 1957 on your paper
Yeah.
here.
that wouldn't be... Yeah, he was born in 57, wasn't he? Yeah, I keep thinking that's the year he graduated. He graduated in 70 something.
And Mark, I've got him
2 years later.
born in 59. And I've got Scott, born in 61.
It's the three of them up there together.
So you've got 2 years apart for each one of them.
Basically, close to it.
Now, John Mary,
Yes.
what's his wife's name?
Terry, T-E-R-I.
Does he have children?
One boy. Mac, no, he's Cyrus. Cyrus.
John still living?
Yes.
Where's he live?
Quincy, Illinois. You have any idea where that's at?
I've seen it on the map, but I can't.
It's on the Mississippi River.
Okay.
He's a doctor.
Southwest?
Almost straight out from here. It's several hours south of Chicago and all that. But it's on the.
What kind of a doctor is he?
I call him a plumber.
Is
You
he
wanna
a
see what he does?
He's a urologist?
What, do you want to see what he does?
He's the heart doctor.
Oh, he's a heart doctor?
I had 5 bypasses by him.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, Mark passed away.
Yeah, took his own life. Just
when
that's
was-
him. That's bottom left there. That's him.
When was that? When did he die?
Tell us what 5 years ago. When was it? He was in his 60s.
Okay. Was he married?
Yes, and he had 2 children and
What was his wife's name?
Sandy. Anyway, if you can think of any reason that he did that, you can't explain it. He's got along. The family was great. His job, he retired from one job, went to another one, and no friction. The boys got along good all the time. Everything was just right, except it wasn't right with him. I know they said one time he was taking some anxiety pills or something, and they said down at the bottom it says could lead to suicide. And guess what?
Sure did.
It did. It was just we couldn't explain it. And
What kind of work did Mark do? Did he go to college?
yes, he had a master's, but he went to Ohio University down
Down in Athens?
Athens. Yes.
And then you have Scott. Is Scott still living?
Yes.
Is he married?
Yes.
What's his wife's name?
Renee.
Renee?
Yeah, Renee is the name. How many kids he got? 4 or 5? 4. He's got 4 children. 3 girls and a boy.
Did Scott go to college?
Yes.
Where'd he go?
I think he ended up at Purdue. Finally, he went to Ohio State, and there was so many nuts over there putting the alarm. They'd trip the alarm, in those towers.
In the dorms?
Yeah, in the dorms, it would trip the fire alarm, and when they fire, they just damn craziness. He got tired of that. He finally went to Purdue, but he's my farmer. He actually manages farms right now. That's what his job is for Farmers National, and he doesn't farm. He takes care of people that farm. Thousands and thousands of acres in Ohio, some out of Ohio.
When did you retire from Gentilly?
I don't know.
After you retired from Gentilly, did you get any other jobs?
Well, we had hobbies. We drove, delivered some trucks for a while. My wife and I both. We delivered. We had a place over here that I didn't remodel them. They put beds on them or something, and then they would deliver them. For example, we delivered in Boston. We delivered in Washington D.C., Indiana, and some other places. And all you do is just drive the vehicle there. And I always tell the story that one time we had an older couple, and they were in charge of this trip. We had to own 4 of us, my wife and I, and these 2 the older gentleman and his wife, and we drove clear to Boston. His air conditioner, I think, quit on the way, and I didn't have 1 minute of trouble. And I got to an Air National Guard base and parked it, and they said, back it over here someplace. It wouldn't back up. It had, a pin had come out of the shift lever or something.
It wouldn't back up.
It wouldn't back up, and I had driven it all that time, and I said, can you imagine? I drove, how many miles it is to Boston? Well, it was an Air National Guard base, but the end result was, he said, just back it over there, and it didn't move.
Well, when you when you deliver these trucks, how did you get home?
Usually we had a van that we took drug it along, you might say, and then we did that several places. My wife and I didn't enjoy it because the guys in the bus or van, they all smoked.
Okay.
So we didn't enjoy it.
So did you do anything else besides deliver these trucks?
Not that you can speak of.
Yes, you did.
What did we do?
You built houses.
Oh well, yeah, that's another story.
Well, tell me about when did you start building houses?
Well, my first house was built in 1959 by a man and his son, and from then on, over time, we built 25 houses, and then we remodeled quite a few houses. And the fellow that the older gentleman died. He was in his 80s, but he could outwork you. I mean, it'd make you look silly because he was active. And one time, for example, back in those days, we carried shingles up the ladder and put them on the roof, you know. And I said, Thurman, you go up there and I'll carry these up the ladder. He says, no, if I get up here and sit down, my legs don't straighten out like they used to. He says, I'll bring them up to you. He was a workaholic. I mean, he could outwork you, and he was 80 years old. He got up one morning, went to the bathroom, and came back, sat in the chair, and his daughter called him and said, Dad, breakfast is ready, and he was dead. That's the way to go, I guess.
Yeah.
Wasn't sick a day.
Yeah.
He'd get to something cold or something, you know, and I think, well, that'll be the end of him. He won't come back to work. He'd be there the next day. Well, unbelievable.
So, who besides Thurman and yourself would build these houses?
Thurman's boy was Lee Schaefer. That was Lee, and he'd been in the Navy. And I always say he got on a train in Urbana and ended up in the Tokyo Bay because he was on the USS Iowa. Anyway, Lee was always in charge after his dad died. And I worked, and I had to order stuff. I could do it by phone, all that stuff, but...
Well, did you do any of the actual work on the houses?
Who?
You.
Yes, we worked. I did electric and plumbing and various things on different houses at different times. I'd do different jobs. I built her house, for example, and did the plumbing, electric, and...
Well, how did you learn? How did you learn?
I built two houses.
How did you learn to do that construction type work? Plumbing and electric and...
Well, I think I just picked it up. I don't know. You can't explain it.
He had an uncle, two uncles actually, that helped.
Well, they knew what electric was, and
So you learned some from your uncles?
probably
Okay.
some of the on-duty jobs, you know. We built this one, for example. This is an art home, and I used art homes a couple times. They were down there near Fairborn, and you'd take down what you want them to do, and they'd make panels and stuff, and you bring the panels back and set it up. So this is, I don't know whether this is the only house, I don't think I built two out of art homes. But anyway, this is one of the well-built houses.
So let's talk a little bit about your sister Janet.
Huh?
Let's talk a little bit about Janet. She's younger than you.
She says she is. I don't believe it, but she's...
Did she go to college?
No, she got married. And then with her husband, he was in the Air Force.
He was in the Air Force. Was he in the Air Force during the...
He went to Vietnam one time, worked there as And they went to England. They went to Panama City, Panama. And
But he wouldn't have been in the Korean conflict, would he?
No.
he was in the Vietnam conflict.
Okay. Janet have children?
I think she did. Didn't you? She had 3 girls and a boy.
Okay.
2 boys.
Mine too.
2 boys and 2 girls.
Did Janet work outside the home?
She worked every place she went, as far as PX and stuff like that. She worked at various things at
At the different bases
yeah,
where her husband would be stationed?
yes.
All right.
They
Is
were
her
down-
husband,
They were at Wright-Patterson part of the time.
what was her husband's name or is?
Thomas Hill.
Tom Hill, and he was actually an airplane mechanic, technically, what his job was in the service.
Hydraulic.
Is he still living?
Yes.
Okay. Let me look at my notes here. Oh, what medals did you have?
Occupation medals, and I got, when I went to basic training, I got a
Marksman?
Oh yeah, I think I was a sharpshooter. Anyway, one of them. But anyway, I got the expert infantry badge, which is a rifle. And if you were in combat, you got a wreath on that. But I got the rifle. I was the only guy in my outfit that got expert infantry, they call it. Anyway, we went to a parade grounds or something, and we stood there while they gave us this award. But one of the fellows was about the second one down from me. I could see him, and he was there, and pretty soon, plop. I mean, he hit like you never saw anybody that shot a hog plop. They just, anyway, you'd say, my goodness, he hit the ground like a, anyway, they finally told us to parade rest and all that stuff. So the reason I got that, I did the things I was supposed to do in the training, and then it gave me an extra $5 a month, which was a lot of money then.
Back then, yes. So the fellow that did the facelift on the ground, did he die or
No,
he just fainted?
Just passed out, and they got him, and they gave us all parade rest and, stand at ease, you might say, whatever it was. But he fell. I saw him. I could see him out of my eye over there. He's about the second guy over here. Drop.
So you got a victory medal.
I got occupation of I think
Japan.
Philippines, Japan, and good conduct medal, and that was about it. I got them in there someplace. I think 3 or 4.
Do you ever have any reunions with any of your military buddies?
Yes, I went to several of them, 3 or 4.
Where would you have those reunions?
One was in Pennsylvania, one was in Dayton, one was in Chicago, and one of the guys that was in charge of 3/4 of the getting people together was a lieutenant colonel, and when he came back, he kept this organization going. It was designed in the Philippines to have the reunion for the division, and I went to see him one time in Massachusetts. He was up there in Massachusetts, but anyway, he kept things going quite well. He was a go-getter. He was one of the youngest to have his job. He was in the ordnance outfit in the Philippines. I don't know how soon he got there, but he was in there. And he said in his write-up, why, he was one of the youngest officers that held that position. I know that.
So you were in the 24th Infantry Division, MP Battalion.
No, NP Platoon.
Platoon?
That's the reason we didn't have a rank. we were only a platoon, and the platoon, like I said, the highest rank was a staff, and I was a staff finally at 19. But the end result was that I was just, evidently I did things, I gave PT and I marched them and I did this, that, and the other. And then on duty, we'd go around to the clubs where the GIs were and try to be sure they weren't in too much trouble.
What was the most excitement that you had as an MP trying to corral some of your fellow
Well,
soldiers?
once in a while, I told you, this one guy was molesting
Yeah.
patients at the hospital. I got him out of there, and then there's several other incidents. I like to tell the story that I was familiar with the camp where they kept the prisoners, my GIs. Anyway, one night, 4 or 5 of those guys walked out the back door. They could open it, and they left. And so my outfit got a call the next day that they were out some Gisha district, wherever it was. And so I get in the van, and I drove it, and I took a guy with me. And we went out, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles, wherever it was. And I put my pistol together, you know. So they said, hey. The guy said, oh, it's AR, Sarge. Okay, you're okay. We'll go. So they all got in the vehicle. One guy had 1 day to serve, and he would have been out of the prison, but he took off with those other guys. And some of those guys were unbelievable.
What do you mean by that?
Well, one of the fellows was from another outfit down in Fukuoka, and some of the guys stopped him at the train station. What are you doing? And he was going to get a train and go back to Fukuoka. It wasn't a GI train, it was a regular train. Anyway, we called his outfit, and they said, you keep him till tomorrow, we'll come and get him. So we, in the meantime, had no place for him, so we took him to this stockade where it was. Anyway, I got a driver, and we went, and when we got there, the guy took off his jacket, and he had a 45 on him, and he wasn't supposed to have. He says, I always carry that when I got a lot of money, and he didn't have any money any more than anybody else. He probably had Japanese money, but he had a 45. Why didn't you throw that? We went past the place he could have thrown it out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I always use that when I've got money. And he was a screw-up. He had been court-martialed a half a dozen times, and just unbelievable. You say, why didn't you throw that away? You know, wouldn't hurt. He wouldn't hurt him anything. Just throw it out. So we get there, and he'd take this off to put on jail uniform, you know, and so he had.
Did you play any part in the court-martialing of any of the men?
Well, I think I'll tell you one story I had that all the time I was there, I probably didn't draw my pistol, but once that I know of that was important. Anyway.
Now, there being where? In Japan?
In Kokura.
Okay.
Anyway, we got a call that somebody up the street had done something, and it was a colored outfit, and they said this guy is stealing stuff out of the other truck. So I went up there, and this guy had a duffel bag there, and a Japanese gal was sitting in the other truck over there, and apparently she's the one that had called and said this guy stole stuff out of their truck. Well, they had a duffel bag there, and I said, what do you got in that duffel bag? And this guy says, I've had enough trouble with you damn guys, and he jerked it away, and so I went around and arrested him. I said, get out of the truck. And that's the only guy I ever pulled a gun on. And anyway, the story was that those guys would carry a piece of chain or something to fight with, you know. And when I got him down to the MP station where my boss was, a major, he said, why didn't you shoot that bastard? Back in those days, you could, you know, do this, that, whatever it was. And I says, if he had gotten out of the truck with a chain, he would have been a dead man. I had no question. I would have shot him. I had everything. But I took him down to the office and set him down, and somebody came and got him. But he was decided he didn't like MPs, but I didn't like him either. That's the only guy I actually drew a gun on and had put ammunition in the chamber. I like to tell the other story about when the guys came over new, we'd take them down sometimes and show them how to shoot 45. Everybody could do it, but they'd shoot 45s, and they'd shoot a little while, and we'd say, "Okay, you guys go back. We'll end up using all this ammunition up." So we'd fire, just like kids, fire, and one of mine went, psst, and I'd say, "Hey, it never went out the end of the barrel." And I go like this and put another round in, and all of a sudden, I think I knew what I said, and I said, "I better look." And nothing. It only went part way in the barrel. Had I fired it, I'd have lost my hand probably.
Yeah.
But anyway, this artificer, the guy we had back there, he said, "Boy, you aren't kidding. That thing was stuck in there, and I had to pound it out." But I already had it up. I said, I didn't even go out the end of the barrel. It went, like that. And one of the lucky things I did was, I guess I better check. And sure enough, wasn't out the barrel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Several little incidents like that you remember. They say, "Oh, that was amazing, absolutely amazing."
Jim, do you have any questions or anything you want to talk to Russ about?
Yeah.
While you were in the service, was the food generally good,
Yeah, it was okay. We asked.
except for the spam?
Yeah, that wasn't anything to it. But when we got to Japan, it wasn't too long that we were eating Japanese food. I had a driver, for example, one time we went out to the wharf, and he went over and got us a fish about that big, All you do, they'd take it down to, my driver was Japanese, Nisi from Hawaii, but take it down, give it to a restaurant, and 2 hours later we'd go down and bring it out. And then but we ate out often. These girls that we knew, like I said, they spoke better English than we did. They had been here. We said, when you get as much time in Japan as we have, because we got there before they did, but we'd go out and have meals. And now I recognize we probably were feeding those girls that didn't get good food. Sometimes, one time I went to the jail across the street, and it was a Japanese jail, and there was a girl in there, and she looked like your daughter or somebody else. She didn't look Japanese even, but she was in the jail. And the story we got, and I regret to this day that I didn't make arrangements for her to get out of there because she was in a Japanese jail. But the story was that she worked for some of these Americans that now had wives over there at that time. And apparently she either asked for or wanted food for her parents. That's the less of the story I got out of it. But anyway, they turned her in and said she was, she looked like any 16-year or 18-year-old girl that you'd see on the street. She was very attractive. And I regret to this day that I didn't go back to my shop and get to the interpreter and tell him, go over there and get that gal out of there, because some American dependent had decided that she didn't deserve any extra or anything for her parents, because the Japanese were starving. I mean, they actually were starving. Where we had camp, the garbage man taking our garbage, he was rich. He sold it. It was amazing. Yeah, you get three pancakes, you throw 2 of them away, and that ended up being, he sold it. It was good.
He also had another occupation.
Well, I was just going to ask you, Janet, if you had anything you wanted to ask him about or bring out. Now speak up loud enough so we can hear you.
He was a real estate dealer here in Champaign County for many years.
I still am, yeah, a broker.
Yes.
A
Real
broker.
estate broker? When did you start doing real estate?
60 years ago, probably. Been a long time.
You're still active in that?
I have a real estate broker's license.
When's the last time you actually engaged in selling?
I don't know what the. I like to tell one story, and I can't tell you what the answer to your question, but one story. My son worked for a company that took care of farms and stuff like that. So one time we went to this property, and this fella had lost the farm because of prices had gone to hell, you know, it had gone bad. So he lost the farm, but he was there. And in the meantime, after he lost the farm, he got an inheritance, and the owners, which was a big company, like farm company that owned the farm now, technically, they had it back on the market. We sold it back to the guy at lower price than he had originally been required to pay, but he'd come into some money, and we sold his farm back to him.
Oh, good.
That's unusual that we could do that. It was absolutely amazing.
Now, which one of the boys was that? Which one of your boys?
Scott.
Scott?
Yeah, Scott's, he's a farmer, I call him. He takes care of farmland now. He's real handy and knows what he's doing and runs the machinery and all that stuff. He went to
Is there
college.
anything that you can think of we haven't talked about, Janet, that might be interesting?
Did you and Dad ever talk about the war?
Not necessarily. He was in World War I, and it was in France, and he tells us one night they took the guy out he was in the hospital apparently, but he said one night they took the guy out on that side of the bed. Next morning they took the guy out, next morning the guy on the other side. They had that flu back in those days, you know, and apparently he survived that.
Uh-huh. Why was he in the hospital?
I have no idea. We just know that he was there, and they said the guy on one side died that night. The next night, the other guy died. Next day, he was in infantry. Actually,
was he in combat?
he was not in combat. He said you could hear the guns, all that stuff.
He ended up with rheumatic fever.
Having what?
Rheumatic fever.
Rheumatic fever?
Yes. And his heart was 3 times the size it should have been when he passed away.
Do you remember when your mom and dad passed away? Do you have any of those dates?
Oh, I don't know the dates. She can tell you probably better than I can. Dad died in '61, didn't he?
No, 63.
63. He was 61. Yeah.
January 26th or 28th. And Mom died in 1978.
I took my dad.
1980 at 78.
I took my dad to the Veterans Hospital in Dayton one time. For example, I was quite young, and we went to the place they give you a driver's license, and I was 13 years old. That's what I was 13 years old, and he had to go down there, and I had been driving. I drove around the country all the time. Back in those days, you could count all the cars that went by here probably on one hand, you know, or maybe two. Anyway, well, we told them that somebody had to drive, and they said, well, if you can drive, we'll give you a license. So I had a license from the time I was 13 years old.
Wow.
Been lucky. Never caused a wreck that was serious or anything else. I've been lucky. Very lucky.
Jim, can you think of anything else?
No.
Well, let me congratulate you on surviving.
Yeah, so far.
And thank you for this interview, and thank you for your service. And I've enjoyed this a lot.
Okay, if you shut that off, I'll show you this. I'll show you my map. My son sent me this map. He did something. You shut that off, did you? Yeah, good.
No, it's,
Anyway, Anyway, there's Japan, and there's, I can show you Matsuyama.
But now let's wait until he gets a picture on it.
I got
You got it?
Let me find Matsuyama. Anyway, they said that's where we would have invaded had we.
Where are you talking about?
Well, I got to find it here shortly. Let me find Matsuyama. There's Japan, and here's Matsuyama right here.
Well, let's.
You see the Matsuyama, word Matsuyama here on one of these. I just saw you a while ago, was here. Anyway, wherever it's at, we went from there over here to Okayama, and then we went down here to Kokura. And Kokura was considered a target for the atomic bomb. It was second or third on the list that could possibly be bombed.
Do you know why that was supposed to be a target?
Yeah, it was supposed to be the steel center of Japan or something. You know, their possibility of. But when we got there, they didn't have anything. They'd steal anything they could get a hold of because they didn't have anything. And one thing they didn't have any food. My parents sent me a notice that there was a food riot in the town where I first was. Anyway, I didn't even know it. It was only a mile away. I didn't even know it was a food riot.
You mentioned that. Did you have any instances in any of the places where you were where Japanese were begging you for food?
No, they'd anything you'd hand them, they were tickled to death to get anything you could get. But
did you do that?
Huh?
Did you do that?
Oh, we gave them food different times. I'll tell you what's most amazing is a carton of cigarettes. They thought they were gold because they'd give you money for cigarettes, and then we'd turn around and use that on the population, you know, whatever we wanted. But cigarettes were like, they'd pay you what they could make in the month or 2 months. They'd pay you one time for a carton of cigarettes. It just was unbelievable.
Crazy.
The difference between the regular economy, it was like 7 yen to $1 when I first got there. I don't know what it is now, probably 201. But anyway, they liked, and they'd tell you, we don't want Cools, we want Chesterfield or.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, they had it all figured out, and but they would do most anything to get cigarettes. It was hard to believe. And I didn't smoke, so I sold some of mine, and I still got some Japanese yen and stuff. And we paid when we went to the hotel or something. We paid for our food
In Japanese currency.
Japanese currency.
How much were you making? What was your pay?
Let's say I was able to send or put in savings $100 a month because I probably was getting 120 or something. I didn't need money because I could sell my cigarettes and worked on the Japanese economy. We didn't trade. Once in a while, I think I bought a camera at the PX one time. I bought some, if I could get a whole dishes, like dishes were made in one of the places I was at, Noritake. Noritake was the name of the dishes, and it was 3 or 4 blocks from where I was. I could get a set of dishes, and I sent 2 or 3 sets home, I think, whatever. And I could send them home for $5, and I could buy them for less than a carton of cigarettes. It was amazing. But that's one of the places was within a block of where we were in this camp. The other thing that's kind of interesting is we had several buildings where the MP headquarters people were. I wasn't there. I was downtown.
What town?
This is Kokura.
Okay.
Anyway, they had factories and buildings and stuff, you know. If you go in those buildings, they were full of equipment, like lathes and stuff, all that stuff. Cincinnati, Ohio. They were made in Cincinnati, Ohio, stuff like that. It was amazing.
Cincinnati Millicron and
I don't remember the names, but I know you say, "Hey, that's back in Ohio."
so
And they
our,
were.
our machines were being used against us in the war.
Oh yeah, and they had plenty of them that didn't get burnt. You know, I mean, they were in this town I was in. It wasn't bombed that much, that's for sure. The Kokura wasn't. It was, like I say, it was going to be a primary target if they didn't bomb Hiroshima. I don't know why they bombed Hiroshima. It's if you look on it, it's inland, it's this, that, and the other, and it's amazing that it was chosen. I don't know what the information was, but a girl that we had in the office, she was a telephone operator or something. She'd been in the States and came back and married a Japanese, and he was on board ship, and she said the ship got sunk and 3 guys survived, and my husband was one of them. But anyway, she was in the atomic bomb, and probably must have been at least a mile from the.
Oh, she was in which town?
She was in Hiroshima.
Hiroshima at the time it was bombed?
Yes. Anyway, she'd show you the back of her legs. The back of her legs had scars, and she said we got under like a window. We had to get down, and anyway, she said immediately these Japanese had set up stations, aid stations outside of town, and she said she got out there and passed out. She had lost so much blood, and. We had one other girl, I didn't talk to her that much, another girl that had been in the atomic bomb, but this gal must have been a mile from the center of that bomb deal, but she was married to this Japanese soldier, and then later on I saw her in San Francisco. I talked to her there, and she'd come back to the States and already had children and all that stuff. It was amazing. The gal I knew, she married a GI, and they were in the service for 20 years or so. But I met them. I went to San Francisco one time for my work, and I went to see these people, and there's the girl I used to take to dinners and all that stuff. She was there, and then I think they were in the service 20 years. That gal had 4 kids or 5 or whatever it was, but I saw her several places. The last place I saw her was in Washington, D.C. She was a beautician. She had got divorced and was still a beautician, but she died about 2-3 years ago now.
Now, the girl that you used to go to dinner with and whatnot, was she Japanese?
She was not. She was American. They had got repatriated back over,
Okay. She was a Japanese American?
She technically was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was interesting, but I understood enough Japanese that I could figure out what they were trying to say, different things. And we'd go to these luncheons, and the gals that worked at the hotel or something, they said, "Are you girls from these 2 or 3 clubs that we had in there?" And she told, no. Actually, they had been in Japan less time than we had. Mm-hmm. I said, well, tell them what you're doing, and they were very good. One of the fellows that I knew, he actually got out of the service and worked for the PX or whatever it was, and he was at the Yalu River about the time the Chinese decided we're going to take over, And he said, had I not got a plane ride, I'd still be in China.
Oh.
It was interesting. He just died about a year ago. He was 95 when he died. But he worked for the PX, and then he came back, and he had a girlfriend, Japanese, and he was getting engaged to her, and he came back, and I think his brother had a wife and a sister. I think he found out the sister was nice looking too, so he married that gal, and they had 4 children or so. And I met him. I went to California, one time, and where he worked, actually owned a farm at one time. I was there, and the cotton prices went bad, so he moved to San Francisco, Fresno, I think was, no, that's not the name. But anyway, he moved there, and then he and his family, sons and all, they used to install filling stations. He says the money now is taking them out. He says we got a good credit, you know. Everybody, so they did that for a number of years. They made filling stations and then took them out, and it was. I visited him. One time we lived on a farm. I visited him, and then one time I met him in where his father lived, and I was in contact with him by phone or something. He said, "Well, if we're not there, the keys under the in the garage under the tackle box." And he says, "Go on in. We'll be back. We'll be there later." But it was up at Cerrito, is the name of the town, and you could look down on the San Francisco Bay. It was I got someplace. I have some pictures that we took of that. It was just, and he showed up later, you know. But it was just amazing. And then later on, I saw him one time. I went out to California to visit. My brother was there most of his life, and then we got together and talked about old times and all that stuff.
When's the last time you went to one of the reunions for your troop?
Let's see. There was one in Dayton about 10 years ago.
Is that
and
about
I
the
went
last
down.
one?
Huh?
Is that about the last one?
Yeah. I went to one in Columbus years and years ago. And anyway, I've been to one in Tennessee, I think, one time. But anyway, it's interesting to go, and all those guys have died off, all of them, including this Lieutenant Colonel I'm telling you about. He was up in Springfield, Mass, I think was where he was. We visited him one time at his office. He was a patent attorney, so we visited him one time up there.
Well, how's your health? How is your health? You've had some bypasses.
Yeah, it did. Those are just 10 years ago or better.
Okay.
My legs are giving me trouble. They say, "Hey, we're not going to hold you too long."
Okay.
I had appendicitis at 94. I had prostate at 95, operations, you know, and had cataract surgery. We tell this story about this doctor that does cataracts. My son and he went to school together at Ohio State. When I talked to him, he says, "I've been to your house." So when my son was going to school, they'd come over and come home, and you know. Anyway, my wife had cataract surgery, and when she got off the table where they did the cataract surgery, she said, "Do anything you want to, no patch, no nothing." And so later on, I had cataract surgery, and no patch, no cover, no nothing. Do anything you want to. I would say he had it perfected.
Now, you're living here by yourself?
Yes.
Able to take care of yourself? Able to drive?
Yeah. And she comes over and does some of my laundry once in a while, a few things like that.
You cook for yourself? You cook for yourself?
I don't eat much. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No spam. No spam.
No spam is right. I haven't had it yet.
Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think would be of interest?
No, probably one of these days I'll think of something, but
Well, thank you very much.